Big bombshell today. 1040 has been taken off the air. 1040 Vancouver. I believe Bell's TSN stations in Edmonton and Winnipeg are also gone. I believe the Toronto one in Montreal will still stay. But Vancouver 1040 Sports Radio is gone. It's going to be replaced by comedy. I've listened to 1040 for a long time, and I've really enjoyed them over the years in many phases of my life. First off, obviously, sad to hear about people like Don Taylor, Marjanovic, Sakaris and Price, Halford and Brough, my favorites. The guys that got me back to listening to sports radio, back to watching the Canucks even, and who I've been listening to for a long time in many phases of my life. But I wish the best for those guys. I think they're all pretty talented, and I'd gladly subscribe to a Patreon podcast of Halford and Brough, maybe Don Taylor. It's a different world going into the podcast route, and getting people to pay for it is always the big thing. But I'd gladly pay, $5, $10 a month, maybe get them on The Athletic. Whatever it is they do moving forward, I'll be there to listen to it. So I wanted to go over my thoughts of 1040 and memories in sports radio. I started watching the Canucks seriously around probably grade 7 or grade 8, which for me was about 1997, 1998, when they were really getting terrible. Mark Messier came to town, ruined the culture, but I was a big McGillney fan. I love the way the guy moved on the ice. Pettersson reminds me of it. I loved how McGillney he was fast, but he made brilliant plays. He just seemed to see the game a lot differently. I didn't really understand it at the time that he was inconsistent and people were frustrated by his injuries and lack of effort, but the team was terrible and he wasn't going to lift them up from it. And actually his trade to the Devils, I remember coming home from school and seeing that trade banner. McGillney traded to the Devils for Morrison and Peterson. Is it Dennis Peterson? And being gutted because I thought, no, I'm never going to get to see them play. But it actually worked out really well because I started watching the Devils that year and started watching the playoffs and following them, and I got to watch him win, McGillney and the Devils win 4 rounds and win the Stanley Cup that year. And being a Canucks fan, I'd never seen a team win the Stanley Cup before, and it was really exciting. And what made it even better was that my little brother's favorite player was Brett Hull, and he was playing for the Dallas Stars, who we watched win the Cup the year before, and they were facing off against each other. And to have that sibling rivalry and watch your two favorite teams and players battle off in the playoffs. I still remember when the Devils won, looking over at him and him being so stunned. He thought, I never thought it was possible. I thought for sure the Stars would win. Anyways, I remember we were up, this is in 1997, and we were watching a bit of the hockey, and it was Edmonton and Dallas in the playoffs, Game 7. But I had to go to bed. And being a kid that always stayed up really late after my bedtime, hiding under the covers and reading books, and, a lamp was my best friend because we didn't have great portable devices back then. So you had to have a book, and I had a little clock radio. And realizing that as I went through, I found people talking about sports and actually broadcasting this Edmonton-Dallas game. And I could listen to it, and it was really exciting. And Todd Marchand scored this big goal. And it was super exciting. And after the game, and after these Canucks games that would come on, I realized there were people talking about the game, and I just loved it. And it's been something that I've been so into my whole life. This medium of people talking on the radio and expounding on it and exchanging those ideas. And finding CKNW 98, Sports Talk with Dan Russell and Brooke Ward on the weekends, calling in with my crazy theories that if Gordie Howe was number 9 and then Gretzky took over at 99, that meant that McGillney would take over at 89, and getting them cutting me off on the radio. Coming to school the next day and having my friend ask me, were you that crazy guy that called in from Duncan and talked about McGillney and the numbers? I go, yeah, that was me. But at that time, hearing these guys break down the Canucks I enjoyed that intimate media and learning about the game because I was new to hockey. I played only 1 year of ice hockey and a lot of street hockey, but understanding the game and the other teams better. And the Canucks were awful then. I mean, Messier was just lazy but demanding top-line minutes, and we still had Mike Keenan before Crawford came in. And there was this transition right until Naslund rose up, and I was playing the hell out of the NHL 98 video game again with my brother. And I was just really into it, and it was so nice to have this this radio teaching you about the team and finding entertainment out of really dark Canuck times. So that's how I originally got into it, and always really appreciated it. And then in 2001, 1040 started, and I remember hearing a postgame show with Dave Tomlinson, and I thought, I'd never heard the game broken down by an ex-player in a deep way, but in a really understandable way. He did such a great job of talking about the different responsibilities of the players and where the breakdowns happened and what they should have been doing. And I remember I remember watching the Canucks game the next day, and it was, what's his name, Dan Murphy, who still does the Sportsnet stuff. And his voice kind of sounded like Dave Tomlinson, so I told my parents, this guy knows a lot about hockey. And then as I watched him, I realized, oh no, that's not him. And I made sure to tell them, no, that's not him. He's a great announcer, but Dave Tomlinson, still giving incredible breakdowns on hockey. And when I worked at the Boys and Girls Club, I would have to start a shift where I came in, I think at like 6 a.m. or something. I had to be there an hour before kids would show up, and we'd have the kids there and then drive them to school and then pick them up after school. And so I'd be mopping the floor at 6 a.m. with a bit of bleach in a bucket and listening to 1040, and it would be BMAC and Ringtool. And, you know, I think Ringtool has a lot of effort, and he was never really my cup of tea in terms of analysis. He kind of reminds me of Jamie Noodles on the Leafs lunch. A lot of effort. They tell you the things that happened, but I always found with radio, I wanted them to dive deeper into it. Anyways, those guys kept me company in the morning. Before podcasts were really popular, and now I'm such a big podcast guy. And this is how I was consuming 1040 radio. It was just download the podcast, skip through all the commercials, skip through all the boring stuff. And maybe that really contributed to why some of this radio format is dying down, I guess. Remember then picking the kids up at school, not my kids, the Boys and Girls Club, and listening to Sakaris and Price, Don Taylor and Pratt, listening to Taylor and Pratt argue about poker, and Pratt getting up and walking out. He's talking about, you just don't get it, Donnie. You just don't get it. These guys, the concentration they have to sit there. Exactly. Sitting. You just admitted it. Oh, whatever, Donnie. You don't get it. Gets up, storms off. Don Taylor is so good at just sort of being a bit of a brat. And I really hope he gets, they find him somewhere else. Because he's a radio celebrity, and he still has the passion. I recently started listening to him again too, and that passion and skill and the angles that he finds are just fantastic. One of my favorite memories with Brough and Halford is that when I went out to Alberta and was working in the middle of nowhere in an oil industry related job called Seismic, where you just spend a lot of time walking and carrying heavy things, but you can listen to whatever you want to listen to as long as you're being safe. And when it was minus 40 and you're working 12 hours a day, it was incredible to have the Curtain Blog postgame show that I could download. And it was like a good hour and a half, 2 hours, letting me know what was going on in the game that I wasn't able to watch because I was working like crazy and didn't have access to the Canucks out there. This was around like 2010, 2011, so the Canucks were starting to get good. And they were marching towards being that team that would go to the finals in Boston. And it was just so great to kind of have their company while working this really hard job and to be able to stay in touch with the Canucks. And it just really clicked with their personalities of they cared about sports, but they were a bit irreverent with it too. They didn't take it too seriously. It was such a nice mix of that humor and passion about hockey. And when after the Canucks went to the final, I still followed them, and then I remember that series they had against Calgary where they just got embarrassed by Furland, and I thought, this team's done. And I started backing off a bit from them. I was playing music on cruise ships, wasn't able to watch out there, and I moved to Toronto, and started listening to the Leafs lunch for some reason, just for something else to do while I was working around the house. Really enjoyed it. And it got me thinking about 1040 again, and sort of getting back into what the Canucks were doing. And when I moved to Quebec about 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw Halford and Brough were coming back to Vancouver sports radio. And it would be on podcasts. And it was great. Started listening, learning about the season they just had with Besser. This was the season right before Pettersson debuted. And it was in the off season. So I was just kind of getting caught up to speed about all the rough years they had with Willie D and Jason Megna, Michael Delzato, the hits king, and Louis Eriksson. And learning about this kid from Sweden that was going to debut at center. And then starting to watch Canucks and listen to these guys get me caught up to speed. And when I couldn't catch the games, getting the breakdown from them about what really happened in it. And even the other moments in sports that I would never really follow, Super Bowl stuff. But just kind of getting that digest. It was nice and helped you kind of stay connected to that world and find some other things to entertain yourself with, like the Raptors going to the finals and winning the NBA championship. Learning about Hughes. And what was his name? J.D. Burke, saying that this guy could be like a defenseman fans have never seen before. Him being so high on him, and it coming true. I recorded when the Canucks were terrible, and they were thinking maybe they could win the lottery for Jack Hughes. I recorded the Young Hughes Boys, Dukes of Hazzard parody song, and they played it on the radio a few times. I remember being at a drive-thru at a Tim Hortons, and hearing from Halford and Brough that Jason Botchford passed. And Jason Botchford, when I was working at a gas station, God, I've had it's weird to hear your life described by, and then I worked at a gas station, and then I worked here. And I swear I've done more interesting things, but actually the gas station was a great place to clear your head. But I remember taking my breaks and reading The Province. I didn't even realize there was a sports section, and really looking forward to Botchford's analysis and breakdowns and how he really brought people in that more intimate way and into what we're used to seeing now online with blogs. And listening to 1040 and these guys got me interested in podcasts and got me interested in wanting to talk and do these kind of shows. And now I stream games, and I love the format, and they were the first people to introduce me to it. And now it's gone out of nowhere. They let Halford and Brough do a few hours this morning. Got cut off. I haven't even checked to see if the podcast is available. And I mean, I know we saw that they've already had a bunch of layoffs. What was it, Dan O'Toole? He was gone. They had that really popular comedy duo. I like their version of highlights. I don't really watch a lot of TV, so I didn't see them. And maybe that's part of the problem, right? And I remember hearing Don Taylor just talking about that and saying, boy, if you make a lot of money, you become the person they want to get rid of. And I thought, that's a bit outspoken to be saying when your bosses could be listening. And what is it, 1 week later, and they're gone. So I hope that these guys are happy with what they do next. And if they still continue in sports, I'm going to be there to listen. And it was such a staple that was there for 20 years. God, and it just seems so crazy. Like all the announcements you would hear in between the show stuff would be like, celebrating 20 years of sports radio in Vancouver. So that's something you did new for this year, and then all of a sudden you decided to just cut it out. Like, you'd think if you were going to go to the trouble of recording something like that, you had a plan to stay around longer, or you were going to try to sell it or something. And I mean, for them to go into a comedy format, comedy's big. It's getting bigger. But people listen to comedy, on podcasts. And I think that's mainly what they're competing with, is why I never listened to the actual radio. So maybe to Bell Media, I'm a part of the problem. I mean, I'll download all the podcasts for sure, but why listen to it live if you got to listen to a million commercials and parts you're not that interested in I can look at their 4 hours of programming. Okay, I want to listen to this segment, this guest, skip the stuff, skip the soccer, skip most of the football. So maybe they were just struggling to monetize it as a podcast. And, you know, they weren't just putting their more advertising in the show rather than in between breaks. So, which is, it's pretty frustrating. But it's you know, it's the game is moving forward. And Bell Media, where I live, everybody hates Bell because they have one of the monopolies on the internet, and the service is quite bad, and getting a hold of their customer service is terrible. So people generally hate them out here in Quebec. And we've seen a lot of layoffs throughout. I mean, wasn't Patterson already laid off by Bell Media just like last year? And then they brought him back because they go, oh yeah, you don't mind traveling and covering every single game in locker room scrum, and you're pretty good with numbers, so we'll keep you around. Now he'll be looking for another job. So, thanks for watching this, and please let me know, your thoughts of 1040. I'll be following these guys closely in the next week. We'll see who goes where. I'm sure some people might end up on Sportsnet. They might see this as seizing a chance to grow it. I mean, sports is still one of those very traditional markets where a lot of people that watch sports are still watching on TV. For some people, it's the only reason to still have basic cable. And you're seeing more and more people convert and getting a Sportsnet Now subscription or an NHL Center Ice subscription. But people like to watch stuff live, and they want to watch it with high quality. They don't want to deal with buffering issues. It's one of the main reasons to have TV, that and the news, that you can turn it on, it's going to work. But it's a changing marketplace, and people have so many options for entertainment. Radio is something where you don't have to think about it. Like, yeah, sure, you can plug your phone into a radio, no problem, but some people don't like to bother going to the hassle of getting a podcast or something, or it's something you can put on at work with multiple people. And there's kind of this feeling of, if you're putting music on of your choosing for a bunch of people, or a radio station or a podcast, you have to make a choice. You got to make a lot of people happy. There's something about just putting on the radio and whatever's on is on, and you're connected that way, where we are becoming more segmented by being able to just pick and choose what we listen to. And there is that thing with the radio that this is what you're getting. Like the Super Bowl halftime show. You may not like or have ever listened to The Weeknd, but now a large segment of people have been introduced to it, and that's just what it is. I watched the Shakira and J-Lo halftime show. I watched most of them. But that's a different conversation about media changing and how they're going to deal with it. And I just hope Brough and Halford can either find another good spot. They've been pretty traditional radio guys for the longest time. I hope they stay in this format where I can hear them. I know they were writing for a long time for NBC, and I read some of their stuff, but I like podcasts, man. I want to hear them talk, so best of luck to Brough, Halford, Taylor, Moj, Sakaris, Price, McCletchy, the A-Dog. Am I missing anybody? Hopefully not. Look forward to hearing you guys in the future. And thank you for 20 years of great sports radio. Bye.